Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Advisicon Academy training. This is the third session of our Modern Project Monday series. My name is Mina Inquist, and I'm a marketing assistant here at Advisicon. We are a group of authors, teachers, consultants, and technologists offering training in Microsoft technologies and project management and methodology. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. Please review the control panel that should be on the top right of your screen. The audience is muted during this session, so in order to ask questions, you will need to submit them in the questions window of the control panel. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the Advisicon YouTube channel for those who could not attend today's session live. Please note that any questions or comments submitted will not display in the recording, nor will any of your personal information be shared. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's instructor, Tim Runcie, Advisicon President, who I will now hand this presentation over to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mina. Welcome, everyone, to our continued series on the new modern project. I will grab a little bit of time at the end, so if you have other questions, you can surface those. But as always, I encourage people to reach out anytime. I think as we're going to watch the technology continue to evolve, is that you're going to have plenty of things that you're going to be able to pick, choose, and be able to reference. So today, I actually am pretty excited. This is one of the topics I love to get into. It's not just about the basics of how does Project for the Web work, but really understanding, not only just what it is, what are the moving parts, but then how do you expand that to your project, program, and portfolio lifecycle, and leveraging some of the differences and decision points that will help you. Our focus is wanting to make sure that as you look deeper into the capabilities of Project for the Web, is that how does it work with other tools? As you know that when you work with technology, in many cases, it's a tool belt, right? And we think about project management, program, and portfolio management is that we don't try and make everything a Swiss Army knife, is that you really want to ensure that the abilities that you have of the technologies, what we call best of breed, provides good value as you're beginning to work through those. So again, as we look at this, I want to just kind of recap a couple things, and then well, remember the idea is to make sure that as people start using the different tools that come along with the new scalability of doing project management, is that Project for the Web is designed to work for organizations that may have low level maturity. In fact, today I was talking with an organization that had spent quite a bit of time, and they really were excited about the agile components that Project for the Web had. While they see these in Planner, they also seeing the fact that as they're working with these, it doesn't necessarily have the ability to have those dependencies. So let me switch over to Project, and what I'll do here is we'll just not talk about Project Desktop, but let's just talk specifically about Project for the Web, and let me bring this up where you guys can see this here. So as we get into kind of launching the home page, Project itself is the ability for you to actually drop what we call a new roadmap. You'll see some of the other options for legacy project, and you can always create from your home page your ability to get in and quickly find where those projects are. Now, if I click on this one here, you'll notice that there's a little bit of an icon difference, is that, again, Project for the Web, or we refer to sometimes as P4W or Modern Project, has three elements. You've got a grid that allows you to come in and literally just start typing your activities. You can quickly touch and edit the percent complete, and any one of these, as you hover over it, you can spin up the details. So I might want to come in here and put some comments or some conversations. I may want to change the overall buckets or categories that I'm working with. But as I'm working with and on this project, these are important elements that we'll talk about for reporting. Or if we work with teams, I want to showcase that information that says, maybe I want to automate it or send a workflow or send that over. So whether I'm working within the legacy environment of project or I'm pulling things at a roadmap, all of this from a modern project perspective or Project for the Web is going to be something that you're going to be going, where are the hooks that I can get into this? And remember, right now today you've got 11 columns plus some of the basics that you can work with. And while you might be able to switch over to what we refer to as the board view in Modern Project, where you can kind of move things based upon progress, you can do your grouping based upon buckets, which you can create. Inherently, what we're looking for is these elements that allows us to marry or merge information in a report or a workflow or in a team environment. And these are the elements that we want to basically build from. So of course, as we think about Planner, the ability for Planner to have just a Kanban-esque view, it doesn't have our ability here to create or disconnect links or attach things together. So as I take the information, I'm getting more and more value, but without necessarily having to put more of the heavy components that we find in Project. Now, what we want to talk about today is how does Project for the web work with other systems and tools? So first off, you can't open Project for the web into good old Project Desktop. They're incompatible at this point in time. And that's important to understand is that if you go into Project for the Desktop, if you open up a legacy or a project online project, is you have access to 48,000 potential columns. And when I say 48,000, you have all of your custom fields, views, filters, all waiting for you. We're here in our environment for Project for the web. It's fairly, I would just say, limited, at least at this point in time. We know it's going to continue to grow, we know it's going to continue to scale, but the overall idea is that it's supposed to be quick and easy to work with. Now, in order to make these elements go between the timeline view, the board view, which is kind of our Kanban or our sprint planning view, and then we get into our grid view, these are elements that we want to see in different areas. So if I go back to the overall intent where Microsoft is going, is that the idea is that there's this one low-code platform that spans across Office 365, Dynamics, Project. So it's important to understand is that now we're talking about the same engine. So if I'm over in Dynamics and I say, hey, listen, I'm in CRM and I want to spin up a new opportunity, we got a new lead, and I want to build a schedule, guess what you're going to be using? You're going to be using Project for the web. And so this new project scheduling engine is designed to help people start moving and using the tool. However, because it's sitting on CDS 2.0, or we call Common Data Service, this AI builder or data connectors, we're going to continue to see more and more plugins that are able to synchronize between those. And today I'm going to actually demo some of these and how they work. Of course, we have Power BI and Power Apps and Flow. And today I'm going to show you some of these elements. Now, Flow, as we remember, has now been renamed to Power Automate. So literally within a week, we've got a change in a title of a product. However, you're still going to build flows using Power Automate in terms of a mechanism. And the overall idea is that because we're connecting our project management platforms together, we now have all of these areas, including Azure. We talk about Azure DevOps and some of the other areas where we can actually start saying, you know what? It maybe isn't in Project or Project for the web, but it might be something I want to bring in from other areas. So whether it's Outlook, To Do, Power Automate, etc., is I have these connected systems for me to be able to work with. Now remember, in Project, the legacy version, we've got some of the standard elements that all work with your existing licensing. So while we started with the desktop and then we can publish into a central repository with a single resource pool, you've got Power BI, you've got your project roadmap, and of course you have this homepage. But here comes Modern Project or Legacy Project now has a new component to it, which is really Project for the web. And so this modern environment says, I'm sitting in a completely different place, but I can bridge between both the online legacy environment with this modern environment through Roadmap, Project Home, and Power BI. We're going to dig deeper in here because I want you to see some of how these elements work together. So we'll talk about these strengths. So first off, since we're referring to the ability to have a good visual and a lightweight engine to work with, the element that really bridges any systems together is what we call Power BI. So let me show you the Power BI report pack that actually comes with the Modern Project or Project for the web. And so this P4W has an existing tool. Now, again, you'll have to hook these up. Basically, you'll drop it into your environment. You can connect these. But the idea with Power BI is I have the same thing that says, you know what, I can look across how many projects I'm reading. And if I also want to start reading across and over to the legacy project, or basically Project Online, I can actually bridge the two into a single report. Nice thing is we've got that visualization. So as I'm looking at some of my existing projects, here's the little logo there for our new environment. Or I want to move to a timeline view here. So let's take a look at this new option that we have. Sure enough, I can come in, I can see, hey, here's the projects that we're working with and what they're named. Some of these are test projects, some of these we're playing around with, but I'm reading out of that environment. And again, I can select or I can change the weekly view, the daily view, or I can go into a monthly view. And again, setting the overall visibility is just as easy as coming in, clicking, and stretching out that visualization. So if I drop down to a week at a glance and say, you know what, I only want to look through the next couple weeks, I want to see these based upon a 52-week life cycle, you actually have this. Again, no changes here. This is all out of the box. This comes with, of course, Modern Project in your Project Online environment, and that way you can actually visualize these, including milestones. So remember, the project for the web has milestones in the project schedule, so we can recognize these, we can see them, and we can go through and actually say, where are they at? When are they completed? What's upcoming within the next week or the next month? So you have that visualization. And for most organizations, they just need to know, hey, I'm not worried about effort-driven scheduling. I just want to know who's doing it, what's the relationship, is it done, and if it slips, how do things move around? And I want to be able to have some visualization across one or multiple projects. And of course, looking at some of the overall visuals is that I can click on these, I can filter them out, and select them as we go. You'll notice that there's upcoming next 30-day milestones, similar to what we get with our standard Project Online Power BI reporting. Next, we'll talk about roadmap key dates, and I get really excited about this because I understand the direction where Microsoft is taking roadmap. And think of roadmap as a tool to bridge basically Project Online, Modern Project, Azure DevOps, Jira, and other pieces. So think of it as a connector. Not so much as like we would say in Power BI, but the ability to say, look, I don't have to build a separate report. I have a connector tool that allows me to surface key dates, key activities across the board. And so I can look across, these are the things that we have in a roadmap, whether I've added these key tasks or I'm going to go through and look at things that are at risk, but I've got visualization coming back to that roadmap. So if I want to sneak over here and show you the roadmap, let's just pop right back out to our overall project home. And if I want to visualize that report, let's just see what we're drawing from. So I can come in here and now say, well, I'm in the Power BI report and I'm looking at my FY20 strategic plan. Some of these elements that we're actually starting to manage or visualize are coming directly from here. So let me zoom this out a little bit so maybe you can see that better. But you can see I've got my basically added, I got my key dates in here. I have some of the items, and when I come back to my report, I can begin looking for what are the things I want to link or have the visualization to where the data is coming from. Now remember, in roadmap, I can go and say high-level information. I may also want to break down into the overall assignments and activities that are coming both out of project. So again, Power BI with Modern Project is allowing me to bridge these. And again, you don't have to build them. These are out of the box. You can simply put them in and connect them together. Now you're going to find as you use Power BI more and more is that maybe the data will come from a project. Maybe it comes from outside of even Microsoft. But the overall idea is I may want to slip into demand and capacity reporting. So here I'm switching over to the resource dashboard, which is for our existing efforts. And I can see some of the assignments completed, future done. I can look at what's overdue in terms of our tasks. I can also look at the amount of effort that might be remaining on some of the work or the work activities. So very nicely done, being able to give us the ability to interact and say, you know, that Michael guy, he looks pretty busy. What is he actually doing? And let's just see, where are the projects that we've allocated him in the Modern Project environment? So again, looking independently, or if you decide to have a merged or married report, we'd start looking for work and effort coming from those tasks and task assignments. Even your end users that say, maybe we don't have the project online fully loaded, I'm just going to start using this, I can still continue to look at the assignments. How many are assigned? What are visible and what's available? And I can scroll through here, and I even have the ability to expand and collapse and look at what are the work and the activities that we're scheduling. So we've got a nice little grid here where you can use an outline format to basically centralize your work and your work details. And of course, using the interface of Power BI, you can connect, make them visible, show and hide different types of data, including even the ability to have the nice little process here. Notice this, not started, in progress, completed. Very simple. So in progress is anything less than 100%, 100% would be completed, anything that has 0%. Again, I also have my ability to apply the filters based upon the resources that I'm adding. Now remember, we talk about with Modern Project or Project for the Web, and we look at this and go, hey, this is great. The resources that we're drawing in terms of assignments are not coming out of our global resource pool. Remember, that is a separate entity with Project Online where we really do project, program, and portfolio management. But this is more geared in alignment with how Microsoft has set up teams. So I don't need the full heavy securities and permissions. I can turn these on and begin assigning people, obviously loading level of effort, checklist of tasks, but I don't have to think through having to set up an enterprise environment. I can get going here. But again, not connected unless you want to bridge those two environments using basically the online login of what is my username or what is my password, what is my email address. I can marry the legacy Project Online, I can carry it over and put in Modern Project. Or if you're just using Modern Project, you have a good review and a report here from your own information. Again, continuing from a resource assignment, we can get into task overview. We can actually see some of the visualizations around, hey, what are the completed tasks? Who's the status manager? Who's the project manager? How are we managing these again? And if you choose to do so, you can bridge both environments. So it's been kind of fun playing around with some of the new Power BI out-of-the-box reports. I can think of some things that we could certainly do to play around with timeline and visualization. But what we get into is many cases, the end user needs a simple dashboard that says, hey, maybe I'm multiple projects. I don't want to hop in between those. I want to look at my work or work assigned to me. And I want to look at how many things have I been built out with, what have I been assigned to, what are the tasks that we're playing with, and what I'm working with. So I have a personal dashboard. I can see what the progress is, the effort remaining. Very similar to the task view, but this more appropriately is aligned to just the individual who's logged in and visualizing these. And then of course the same with just not just a punch list of tasks, but we can also look at my own personal task list in a timeline view. So now I'm kind of filtering that directly. Again, a couple ways to play with this, but again, the idea is that having a personal dashboard across basically Project for the Web is going to be helpful. Now, because Project for the Web is fully birthed in the CDS 2.0, we're talking about the new environment that we're able to work from. What we can also do is think about how we use this in terms of teams. If you haven't seen some of the demos, in fact, let me just bring up a team here, is that as you go through, you may not be aware of this, but you can add a tab. And when you add that tab, you can come in here and you can start selecting what type of environment you want to work with. In fact, you also can add lots of things besides just projects. Some people are adding Jira. Some people are adding little checklists or boxes coming from different places, your work board. So both there's just Microsoft and non-Microsoft environments that you're able to work with, even lightweight scheduling, task management, planner type tools like Rike, they're all there. But if I want to search, I can actually go in and say, hey, listen, I can start looking for apps that I may want to add. And the value is that if you bring in an app, you don't just necessarily have to stage a SharePoint site or a Power BI, but that I can also bring in things like my Power BI reports, which is for my team is helpful, but that Power report can actually come directly from here, needing that URL to log in. Now, if going back to Teams, if you think about that central hub, which is my ability to come in, and if I'm going to work with either different channels or functional elements, is that I can bridge and bring elements like, hey, listen, it doesn't just have to be the Microsoft modern project. Maybe I have a legacy project that says, you know, we're doing high-level planning, but it's got a SharePoint site, so I want to bring these together. Or perhaps as I'm working through here, I really do want to bring the actual project schedule that's coming out of legacy project, but then my marketing teams, my finance teams, where they might be in Planner using it, they might say, you know, I need a little bit more of that predecessor successor dependencies. So through Teams, I can bridge and carry these over, including even carrying over different types of Power BI reports. Now, what I wanted to talk about was the elements that we find using Modern Project, or basically Project for the Web, and coming in here and saying, hey, look, maybe what I want to do is go way beyond that. Instead of me authenticating, it knows who I am once I tell it to. Here we go. Is let's take a look at something completely different. So, yep, I can add a tab, I can click on it, I can search, but I may want to create my own report. Or what if I want to create something completely different? And this is important here, is that maybe what I want to do has nothing to do with Power BI. I want the ability for me to write data, move it, push it, report on it, group it, sort it, but I'm looking for information that says I want to actually visualize the information that I have in my project online environment and perhaps my project for the web. So what you're seeing right here is we built a little bit of an app. We basically built this in .NET and said, you know what, because CDS 2.0 is kind of the platform that both project online, Dynamics Working for, through and with, is that I'm not limited in either using basically the Microsoft's Power App or the Power BI or even getting into Flow, but what if I wanted to build my own special interface that allowed me to interact with multiple systems? So in this case, this app that we built here is just showcasing the fact that I can bring this in and make it look like Power BI, but I can come in and say, well, you know what, I'm looking at my team dashboard. And I can actually go through here and have it interact and show data or numbers weekly, daily. I can have a checklist coming from Microsoft To Do in here, or perhaps maybe you're using something like ServiceNow and you have lightweight scheduling going on with Project for the Web. We can marry these together. In fact, I can even get into a specific project dashboard. And I actually says, you know what, let's just take a look at Dev Project 1 here. And I've got 4 tasks that need to be basically total tasks being worked on, not a big project. I got 2 complete, I got 2 that are late. And I can see who's actually late. I can actually click on these and manage them. Or I may want to come out here and say, well, what is happening in terms of the start and finish dates? And so whether I'm looking at a single project or I want to switch between some that I own, is that I actually have visualizations that I can actually bring together. Now, what you're seeing here, this is not Power BI. This is something that I have created as our team said, you know what? I want to connect a modern project, but I want to be able to maybe edit, modify, change the data. So whether I do this as an app in Teams where I can embed that, or I'm just leaving it sitting out there in my overall environment for Project for the Web, is that you're not restricted to being able to work with the environment. Now, we do know that there's limitations that Project actually has for us, so we have to be careful because you can't do everything like you do in Legacy Project or Project Online. But I certainly have the ability to say, you know what, if I have a team coming in, well, maybe I'm not going to use Power BI because I actually want to have workflow or I want to have captured information that I want to find out. So I can come in here, I can see what's the team that I'm looking at an individual project, or I can come in and say, you know, let's just clear the late, showing all the work and work activities by project. Again, this is a .NET app that actually lets me come down here and look across the different projects that I'm working on, see the assignments, see the start and finish, and I have a little bit more functionality. Again, you can jump from page to page and go previously. Now again, as a simple app, in terms of being able to provide maybe a different interface or be able to collect information, this comes up quite frequently. And because Microsoft has really kind of opened the platform, perhaps I'm working in Dynamics, I have some financial reporting or financial information, perhaps I have something in CRM. But again, it's all basically lifting up the hood and seeing all the moving parts in the same environment. And then the beautiful thing is bringing a team app or a view that says, once my people come in and they work on this, I've got all of it kind of centralized in one particular environment. So these are some of the strengths that Project for the Web actually brings to the table and allows us to work with. You can certainly do Teams as an app. You can do security groups, which is great because I just simply turn it on and begin inviting people. Inherently, I also have the ability to showcase the .NET components or the Power BI embedded information. And again, you can use Flow to send alerts and notifications. Again, all of this, not necessarily large or complex steps that you need to be able to hire a developer to do, but you have some flexibility and functionality that you can bring together. Now, these are some of the strengths. I wouldn't be who I am if I wasn't there always working on the forefront to help represent what is it that Microsoft can improve upon. So I'm going to take a moment and talk about a couple of what I refer to as some of the weaknesses. So as we're going through, whoops, we're not ready for that one. As we go through and we talk about with our environment, what are some of the weaknesses that Project has today? So if I'm bringing in my roadmap and I drop directly into my overall environment and says, hey, listen, I really like what I'm finding here. Teams are using it. What are some of those limitations that I may need to either work around or I may need able to pay attention to while I'm building an app or I'm building reports? And so in terms of making sure we have those, here are some of the gotchas that you want to be at least watching and seeing if Microsoft can evolve over time. First of all, one of the weaknesses of Project for the Web is that its strengths and its weaknesses are literally complementary. So being simple and easy to use and setting up security groups like Teams, very helpful. However, at this point in time, there is no standard API that says, hey, we've got a web API that we can jump in. There is an API, basically the ability to go through CDS and begin looking at what's happening. But for right now, this is all read only. At least at this day and age, is that I can look at data and I can make it read only. If I need to pull information from other places, I'm going to have to do that a little bit differently. And that's kind of why we talk about building an app that you can actually look at. Again, the beautiful thing about working with an app or working through a view or a report is a view lets you see it, a report lets you see it, and an app can let you edit. However, you can add custom columns to this environment. Unfortunately, we're not able to surface those custom columns. So in many cases, we may be stuck with what we're able to see here because of the way that Modern Project is set up, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't create custom columns or custom data behind the scenes. I just am not able to surface them at this point in time. And trust me, though, I'm always looking for ways to sort, filter, and group information in the Project Online environment. But at this point in time, we're going to be using the interface and the 11 plus columns that have been added, and that's what we get to work with. So these entities table, there's called an entities table that sits behind the scenes, allows you to add your columns, but again, they're only visible in CDS. Now, through automation, you can also create a project, which I like the idea of. Perhaps maybe you're out here in a SharePoint environment and you go out and say, you know what I'd like to do is I'd like to have just kind of a SharePoint site, or maybe I'm over in Dynamics and I have approval to proceed and I get a notice to proceed, or I'm doing something and I want to actually launch and create a project. Oh, that's funny. So my site, I have a little SharePoint list here, but what I want to do is I want to trigger a project. So if we want to just tell you what, we'll just take the standard legacy project here of Project Online, is that if I want to simply run a template, I can import that in. There's some mechanisms to draw these in terms of visualizing what those are. Or, you maybe have come out here originally and said, you know what, I like having one of these templates that I can draw from. Well, with Modern Project, at this point in time, as I come back in here, is that I can create a project, but unfortunately, I'm not able to create tasks programmatically. So these are some of the things like chipping away with, which is, hey, I can spin up a quick project. I can actually have everything kind of set up and in place. Perhaps I want to line out the group, and I may want to even make this visible in Teams, but I'm unable, at least programmatically behind the scenes, to create the tasks. So now not that this is very hard to look at how to import and manage these, but remember, user voice, we can continue to make the requests that we want in terms of adding tasks. So as today of this recording, at least when this webinar is, I can spin up these projects. I can do through with work visualization and through automation, but I'm not able to put in an actual set of tasks. The other, what I would call a weakness, is that the time phase data, we start talking about looking at our timeline in Project for the Web here, is that this timeline data is somewhat limited. Now, I do expect this to grow because that is the strength of Project, is to be able to say, what are the hours? What day, hour, minute were we able to work with? But at this point in time, there's a little bit of limitation of what we'll be able to get to in terms of the information that's been surfaced and made available. But today, remember, this tool is only a couple weeks basically from launch, and so it is very much still in its infancy, with the intent to grow this over time to eventually potentially replace the overall legacy project. So when we think about the structure of how we put this together and what the pieces are that we have, Project has a lot of elements for what we're able to do in the legacy environment. As we look at our new environment, we're able to certainly spin it up, drop it into Teams. We could build apps. We have Power BI reports that are strong enough for you to at least build and grow from. And we also have the same platform, because we're using this in the Dynamics environment, to work with this. There may just be a little bit of limitation in terms of having a published API, but if you're working with CDS 2.0, which is really the overall engine of how and where Project sits, you'll be able to see the entities that you're able to work from. Now, let's just take just a moment. I want to see if we have any questions that surface. Sometimes these pop up. I got a question from a user this morning, but Mina, were there any questions that I can answer?
No questions from my side right now.
Okay. So one of the questions came up was about licensing. And so if we are going to start working or sharing information in Teams, do we have to get licensing for all the different products that we work with? And again, I want to answer this directly, which is the short answer is yes. For example, if you are working in the legacy project environment, so if I sneak over here to Teams, let me bring this back up for us. And what you want to do is you'd like to say, hey, I'm really enjoying working with this overall environment, but hey, I want to show the Microsoft project schedule in this environment. Then people will see this based upon whether they do or don't have a license. So sometimes it's figuring out what is the right license as people come into your environment, just making sure that's surfaced. Whether it's a Power BI, kind of a view license, or we look in terms of the overall ability to edit and assign task and task information. But the idea is that Microsoft says, hey, look, if you want to bundle these all together, create views, just make sure you have the right set of licensing. So from programmatic interaction with Power BI to embedding that in Teams, or even building your own app and surfacing these things, not a problem. Just make sure you're able to build it. And if you do want to share information, you want to make sure that's visible and available, and do throw it with the right license. Okay, Mina, any more questions that surfaced? Or are we still?
No more questions at this time.
Perfect. Well, I know what's going to happen is some of you guys will definitely bring this in front of your technical teams and they'll want to rip it apart and dig deeper. And I encourage you guys to reach out, because as time goes by, information is going to be continued to be updated. The Microsoft team is working through a tremendous amount of what we call feedback right now. And remember, we talk about user voice. So if you want to come in, whether it's legacy project or you want to share that, you have the option to come out to user voice and say, vote, and actually put information out there. Please do this. There's lots of good feedback that's coming in, and as much as we like to collect it, I think you actually have the ability to vote and request things for Modern Project, what you'd like to see changed. All right, to summarize today, just remember, Project for the Web is fully on the CDS 2.0 platform. Again, the idea is that we have now the same platform that works between multiple Office 365 products, Dynamics, CRM, Project itself, and we're able to actually begin sharing, moving, updating information, creating reports and views. And so as Project continues to mature, you'll see more and more expansion in this area, including partners like Advisicon and others. We're going to put things out there for you to work with. Project, of course, for the web allows you to integrate between different systems, including the ability to use those Power BI reports to read both from Project Online and Modern Project. So Classic and Modern can be brought together into a view. And again, that ability to embed information directly inside of a team, very, very important. I think that's going to be one of the key elements to keep people from hopping from different windows or different apps, as you can share that. Still in the early stages in terms of a weakness, so we know that there's going to be growth, but the ability to automate a project versus automating tasks, these things are still on the punch list. And the idea, of course, that we can actually look at time phase data, but we don't have a lot of access to that, is something that we'd certainly like to see continue to expand and grow. Our ability certainly to launch, like I said, projects, but not being able to do editing directly of tasks is something that you're going to have to use the interface for. But that doesn't mean that we can't create either an app that says I'm reading from both a project on the web and maybe reading from other systems, and of course embed that into a view. So you've got a lot more flexibility. It's kind of a whole new day in terms of what is being built and how it's being presented. So we've got a couple more topics coming for Modern Project Monday. I think our next session that we'll talk about is understanding the licensing and the role of where project fits and what licenses go together. So I'm going to kind of tie all the pieces, make sure we understand that functionality, and then make sure that you clearly understand where to go and what licenses you'll need or not need, depending on what you're working with. As always, if you have any questions around projects, SharePoint, Power BI, these are things that we do all the time. We look at the project management spectrum. So I just encourage you to reach out. And sometimes, even if it's been a few months, you may want to find out if there's any updates. Just let us know. We love being the evangelist, trying to help share that. So Mina, let me kind of hand this back to you. I know I've covered quite a broad bit of information, and I know some of you may want to rewind and play this a few times. But Mina, let me hand it back to you, and then we'll wrap up today.
All right, thanks, Tim. Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We welcome your questions and feedback. For more information, you can email us at contact@advisicon.com. On behalf of Advisicon, Tim and myself, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you participate in future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, now.